Eugenio Scalfari, an astrological portrait of Ciro Discepolo, written in August 1986, examining the transits of January 14th, 1976, the birth date of the newspaper La Repubblica. One cannot help but doubt that it was more than suggested by an astrologer to the great journalist born in Civitavecchia on April 6, 1924, at 7 p.m. Otherwise, we would have to believe in an extraordinary instinct, an exceptional extrasensory sensitivity, or a pact with the devil. The transits in question, in fact, could not have been better. Jupiter perfectly conjunct at 0 degrees, the radix Sun, trine itself and trine Neptune, also natal, the midheaven trine Jupiter and the Sun, at the time of the first copies of the newspaper's publication, as well as conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees. And then Mars almost perfectly sextile the radical Sun and Venus, trine the first luminary and conjunct good Jupiter. There are definitely too many transits and too many good ones to be a coincidence. The most logical thing to think is that Scalfari sought the advice of an astrologer. So, does he believe it? That's not necessarily true, but the famous refrain, "It's not true, but I believe it," applies here. And if it really worked, he might have said to himself, "Barba Papa," as his collaborators jokingly and affectionately call him, "why not give it a try?" And so I think, one day is as good as another, he must have said to himself, and he accepted the astrological advice, Mercury's day, the day of communications, of the press, and I believe he no longer has any doubts about the appropriateness of having chosen that day for the launch of his newspaper, given that it was an extraordinary success, a commercial and cultural enterprise of the highest order. Today, La Repubblica vies with Corriere della Sera for the top spot in sales, and is undoubtedly the newspaper read by the country's entire ruling class, by all those who matter, by the Italian intelligentsia, by men and women of culture. People like its format, its writing style, and the determination with which it tackles problems, its way of saying things, its editor's decisiveness, its secular and anti-clerical stance, its social liberal roots, its independence, its courage in tackling even the most thorny or inconvenient issues. It is certainly a newspaper conceived and produced by a great journalist, designed by one of the greatest Italian journalists, precisely Scalfari, by a man who, like Montanelli, speaks to Italians in their own language. Scalfari comes from a great school of journalism, but he also brings with him a powerful Jupiter on the border between the second and third houses, trine to the Sun, which ensures the success of his ventures and promotes exceptional victories in the field of print media. He was born as a business journalist and remains one, especially in the sense that he knows how to financially manage his own newspaper. As a true Aries, he's a pioneer, and no one could ever deny that his was a pioneering undertaking. He invented a newspaper, a way of reporting. He took enormous risks, and he won. He is a winner, there's no doubt about it. His solar dominant makes him a born leader, an ideal conductor, an absolute leader. And the dominant is certainly the Sun, since the star at the time of his birth was closest to one of the four corners of the horoscope. In fact, it was immediately after one of the four corners of the radic, just below the sunset line in the sign of its exaltation, in a position where it received and gave different aspects. The subdominant is Saturn, exalted in Libra, and largely conjunct below the horizon. This double dominant has earned him the nickname Barba Papa. He has the pride, poise, and determination of a Garibaldian grandfather. He also appears a bit haughty and presumptuous, but this doesn't hurt and doesn't detract from his regal status. Once to a traffic warden who fined him, he said, "You don't know who I am." And the statement perfectly reflected the authority of the figure who, in the best sense of the word, has the attitude of a dictator. If he weren't at least a little authoritarian and proudly aristocratic, he wouldn't be where he is now. Scalfari descends from a cultured southern aristocracy linked to Masonic lodges, those not yet poisoned by the Gelis of today. He himself says of himself, "I am a half Calabrese." He lived for many years in the south in Vibo Valentia and inherited all the rugged consistency of Calabria. His commitment to journalism developed over the years and was not a starting point or a childish aspiration. In my opinion, Mars in the third house played a major role, a position frequently found in the charts of individuals heavily involved in writing or otherwise in the world of print. In 1961, there was a major crisis with Saturn on Mars square to the Sun, but everything was overcome, and we arrived at his first important political office, Deputy Secretary of the Radical Party. But subsequently his political identity became confused, certainly not through Machiavellianism, but due to the real complexity of his internal issues, which would lead him to embrace increasingly autonomous and counter-current positions. Today, it's difficult to say exactly what Eugenio Scalfari is from a political perspective. He says of himself, "The communists like me because I'm a liberal." The fact remains that he has always had, and demonstrates it every day, a great independence of judgment, non-partisan, like Montanelli and Enzo Biaggi. Perhaps he has something less and something more than Montanelli. He is certainly less visceral, subdominant Saturn, and more strategically, or should we say demagogically, optimistic. Alberto Ronchet said of him, "He manages to reconcile emotion with marketing." Between 1977 and 1978 he joined the communist camp, but subsequently his alignments were strategically different, and his newspaper has repeatedly found itself criticizing the PSR from different positions. He is a strange man of the left, who has demonstrated his degree of freedom by supporting Demita and fighting Craxi. He is a great opinion leader or opinion maker. He is essentially a major politician who does journalism, not the other way around. He knows how to anticipate the moves of those in government, and is therefore always timely with the news. But perhaps his greatest virtue from a journalistic perspective lies in knowing how to write exactly as he speaks. Limpid, crystalline, transparent. Ronchet also said, he writes like a Polaroid photographer. He makes himself understood by everyone, and everyone reading his articles thinks, "I could have written it myself." With his proud and aristocratic air, he's also very popular on television, and I think he would have a lot to do with this medium. Many say that the future of the press is television, and it seems to me that Scalfari has a great future in this direction. Once again, I would see him as an entrepreneur. At the time of writing, the law allowing networks to manage their own news programs is still a pipe dream, but I'm sure it will soon become a reality, and then Italy will certainly be divided between his news program and Montanelli's, plus Biaggi's, possibly. This could happen during 1987, when Jupiter flies over his sixth house, and the Radic Sun in particular. At the same time, Saturn and Uranus will be conjunct his natal Jupiter on the cusp of the third house. The simultaneous presence of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in the third house will mark major changes in your life as a journalist, and I am convinced these changes will be especially related to telecommunications. This year, however, the solar return suggests caution in spending and investments. This is a transit year leading to approximately 12 eventful months. Good luck to Jupiter.